Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is part one of the making of Steel Core, off of my last EP. The R is silent. It'll get real confusing when I actually get to doing the making of R is silent. Anyway, this track on the EP is actually the oldest one that's there. Not all the tracks are like the latest and greatest, and all the techniques and new and tracks or whatever that I do. Some of them are pretty old. This one is the oldest. This one I actually made before I made Momentum, the album. Um, I made this when right when I joined Fixed. That's because when I joined Fixed, they sort of encouraged me to try and merge metal and EDM and in ways that would be cool for me to do, and they were particularly keen on this idea of like the kind of neuro sound processing I do, and then also metal. Thing is though, at the time I had tried to do that before, and every time I'd ever done it, it always resulted in ultimate failure. To the point where, and not only that, but I also never heard of a good example of this being done. Like, Cell Dweller stuff works out pretty good, but I wouldn't necessarily call that, like, neuro kind of stuff. More lately, he's been getting into that, and it's also been sounding pretty great. But at the time, I had never heard a good example of this being done. And so much so that, like, if I would say comically that if I ever... It was the fastest, surefire way to fail at something would be to attempt to merge the two sounds. But I hadn't tried in a while at the time, but so I decided to give it a shot, and I did two things. I made one EDM-ish track with metal in it, and I made one metal track with EDM in it. This is the one that's the metal track with EDM in it, and then the EDM track with metal in it ended up being Deathblow, featuring Cell Dweller. This track I made that at the same time that I made the other track, but that's the one that ended up going on Momentum, and I couldn't really figure out where to go with this track. When I first made it, I got as far as this. I had made the first drop. I made this sort of chorusy bit, and I made a lead, and I didn't know how else to do. I mean, there was all of the main elements of the track, but I didn't know I couldn't really figure out how to finish it. And then when it came time to do the R silent, I realized I heard this and I was like, this really needs to like be a finished track. So I decided to give it a shot. Now, let's talk about what I called this track earlier. That it's a metal track with EDM in it. I definitely did approach this when I wrote it as I would a metal track, and I was actually a lot closer back then to my metal days than I am now. Like, or maybe a year before this, I started writing this track, I was just straight up a metal producer. I hadn't started to do things like bass antics or any of the neuro stuff up to that point. I didn't know how at the time, so I was just doing metal. So I still had a lot of my metal tendencies, and one of those was to do very low-tuned things. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure this track is in A sharp. Low A sharp. So, like, standard tuning on a guitar is E. Right there. And I am down there. That's 8 semitones lower? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because that'd be 7. A sharp. The thing about that, though, is that the sub bass for this is hilariously low. And bass in general becomes kind of an issue. Especially when that low rumbling sound, 30 hertz bass, which is usually where you cut off the bass. And that's just where the bass lives in this track. There's going to be a lot of discussion about that when we get to the mixing and mastering part, but this is the arrangement elements where we sort of identify what individual things are. So when we break into this track, we get a nice ARP, which is kind of my go-to thing for intros when I don't know what I'm doing. And this track was very much, I didn't know what I was doing for this intro. I just kind of wanted to get out of the way. It ended up working out pretty good. It's also combined with a Valhalla Shimmer. I really do that a lot, don't I? Someone pointed out about how it grossed them out, and I never noticed it, but I'm all self-conscious about it. Thanks, dude. But Valhalla Shimmer is what causes that, like, kind of orchestra sounding almost blur behind it. That's what this is. It turns it on up and up. There it is. So that's what that is. There's a big bass drop in the sub. It's actually kind of interesting that I had a separate sub in this track, because I wasn't really big on the concept back then. I was barely big on the concept when I made the R is silent, and this is something I made more than a year before. About a year, actually. Now, yeah, I did it again. So the part about this being a metal track primarily actually stems from kind of how I did the percussion. Superior drummer, which is all lots of fun. Regular EDM doesn't really have that many kicks in it, unless it's like an intro or a filler or something. But metal has kicks everywhere, so I had to kind of merge the two universes. And the way that I did that was I had just made a pattern as I would if this were just a 140 BPM metal track, and I supplemented that with harder like bassier hits. And I think maybe some more other things. No, I think that's pretty much it, isn't it? And with proper sidechaining, it sounds nice and hard enough, that kind of thing. My idea of sort of introducing electronic elements was to go immediately to the 808s. So that's what I did. And it ended up having hilarious trap connotations later. Nice UI bug, holy crap. Like a little trap interlude there, and trap interludes here. Like when I initially layered in those drums to give force to the metal percussion, I didn't know that I was gonna have it later. It was very much an unplanned thing. So like it lends force to, you know, the sparsity that would be present if this were just a straight up dubstep track. But it also gives us room to have the metal drums just do their thing, full of metal tendencies and such. The guitar itself is how I do every guitar when I record any guitar. It's originally a dry signal, and I am processing it through a whole bunch of stuff. This particular stack is actually a relic of my metal days. The preset that I saved from back then. I'm also individually sidechaining it to the kicks and snares and that kind of thing. I guess we'll get to the particulars about this when we do mixing and mastering and sound design, really. But this is an amp that I like to use. I actually just like using Guitar Rig 5 alone these days, but if I want to get really particular about the kind of distortion I want to use, this is something I use a lot. And this is free. So if you Google this, that's Poolin LE456, you'll find this plus a whole bunch of other good stuff that Poolin has made, and they're pretty good. The idea is that you have a head, and then you have a cabinet model. I use a Guitar Rig for the cabinet model. And that's a lot of fun. So that's how the guitar works, but the signal was originally dry. And you might have just noticed that sounds like a mistake. And it does totally sound like a mistake, but because of the miracle of sidechaining, it doesn't matter. That's one of the blessings of electronic dance music. Yeah, so ARPs and whatever. Now, the bass under this is actually kind of interesting. This is going to be a lot of fun when we get to the sound design part, because this is actually something that I pulled off of, at the time, I had just come off of a collaboration with BT. We had together remixed a Cell Dweller track, Unshakable. And I came up with something that I used in that track that ended up being really interesting. And it might have actually been something that I did during the original, mine and BT's original collaboration that I did when I visited him, which never got released. And it was an interesting idea. Basically, I mean, we'll get into the more specifics, but basically it's a bunch of I'm automating the harmonic detune, so it's moving. It's basically frequency shifting. I actually recently learned that the process of the harmonic detune inside Harmor is actually exactly the same as the frequency shifter. Not in the sense, not like in the result it moves differently, but what it does and the harmonic movement and crushing of the harmonics, where it's still like the same note, but the fundamental moves up and down. That's what that is. And So there's a way to set it up so that you're basically moving between saw and square, but via the frequency shifting and not just turning on and off harmonics. And that's what I'm doing. That's what this automation clip here is. It's automating that. Some of them are called unison. I'm not totally sure why, but that's really it's just a harmonic detuning multiplicator. Harmer's frequency shifter. Wow, that was a big one. Yeah, so that's that bass there. There's also a little bit of harmony rate sampling. Whenever you see, like, I have, like, here's the real bass, and then here's the resample. I basically resampled the entire thing all at once, and I just cut in which parts I wanted over time, and kept in some of the real original ones. And then also there's a separate sub on top of that. This guy is actually synth reinforcement for the guitar. This is playing inside the same channel as the guitar. It's playing not at bass level. That's bass level. That's guitar level. That's the level at which the guitar is playing, which is not a bass instrument. Which is hilarious considering that's normally guitar level. And this is like normal EDM bass right here. E. Here's your E. And here's where this track is. Here's where Seven Lions She Was is level at. And also where my track Third Watch is, which was inspired by that track. Weirdly enough. And then here's where this track is. A sharp. We'll talk about the mixing challenges when we get to that. Now, weirdly, because this track was made over such a long period of time, I actually used 3 different guitars on this track. I used my Schecter 6-string to do this originally because that's all I had. And then I used the Douglas cheap-ass 7-string when I got the 7-string because I wanted to check it. I wanted to break it in, and I thought, well, why not work out this track? And that ended up working out. And then I used my new Schecter 7-string to do the solo for this track. There is a solo, and you might notice that the solo is heavily edited. This is because I did not have the patience to learn and perfectly recreate a good guitar solo, so I kind of bullshit one. And the way this works is that I essentially loop a section, I lead into it, and I just jam, for 7 or 8 takes. And then I have 7 or 8 takes worth of stuff. I just kind of cut all the good stuff and wrap it in together in a way that's passable. Lots of editing, lots of corrections, but it also, sort of sounds good for it, for all the, also some gross beat stuff in there to kind of make it sound all modern and cool. That's a lot of fun. The lead synth, this guy down here, this is actually from Calibrate, where I made this lead originally, only I altered it a bit, put some reverb and made it a little more evil sounding. Let's see what else. Oh, what I can't show you is that there's actually a string layer near the end there, which is actually very obvious when you listen to it for the real version. But because I on purpose deleted the library that's from. I haven't reinstalled it yet now that I have space, and so we can't play it. But it's there, and it's just some strings. It's really just a string layer for the second time the lead gets played. Guitars. Sometimes it's kind of very obvious that the guitars are different. Other times not so much. I mean, in recording-wise, you can tell they're different because, the inputs here are way hotter than the inputs here, which only matter a little bit when it comes to the kind of distortion in terms of changing the tone. It's not so different than the fact that if I never told you, you might not have never known. I mean, you can tell just because, again, it's different. Yeah. So, the fun, that's pretty much it, honestly. The art from the beginning I put in various places to kind of reinforce the melody, that kind of thing. There's a separate sub, the guitar, the one bass. Like during there is really only one bass happening in this entire track. Now that I think about it, it's a very versatile bass. It sounds different a lot of times when you hear it. A lot of the parameters that change make dramatic difference, and also it has a couple of settings to it that over time change. So even if the modulations are identical, the fact that it progressed over time a little bit means that it's going to sound just slightly bit different. So we'll talk about that when we get the sound design. But for the most part, that's pretty much it for this track. It's rather straightforward, if not a bit difficult, because merging the difficulty of this track was not really writing it. Like this is a very simple progression, very simple presentation. The melody itself is even very simple. It does the whole flat 2, flat 7 1 thing, which everybody has done ever since the Matrix came out. And like the hardest part is getting the drum mixing right and the guitar right. If you're not familiar with Superior Drummer is a thing that's engineered to sort of recreate working with an actual acoustic guitar recording. The samples on each instrument are not recorded per instrument. It's not like, okay, here's a set of snare samples, here's a set of tom samples. It's recorded per microphone position. So if we go into the mixer here, we see that we have kick in, left, right, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, dynamic, condensers, hats, toms, overhead drummer, ambient close, ambient far, mono close, mono far, chamber. And it's also completely unprocessed, like utterly naked, original, in the mic, nothing else recordings of these drums. So it is as clean and unprocessed as you could possibly imagine. And even if you so desired, you can simulate and bleed, because the what they've done is that like when they recorded this kit, they had the kit set up. So that means that when I hit the snare and there's bleed on like a tom, there's actually a recording of that snare hit through that tom mic when they made that hit. And there's like that for every single microphone on this kit. This is the Metal Foundry expansion to Superior Drummer. There's more than one kit. There's a lot of kits. But there's more than one instrument and that kind of thing. There's a lot of stuff. But like in total, it's like 55 gigs or something. It's a huge amount, like 38 gigs or something like that. It's very large. But yeah, Superior Drummer. It's also, got round robin, velocity sensitivity. It's like, it's fucking good. Like, chances are, if you have listened to like alternative rock or even real rock and metal in the last like 7 years, you've heard like 90% Superior Drummer. Not specifically this kit. They have a huge range of kits. Honestly, Superior Drummer and Easy Drummer, the same company, they're the best acoustic drum libraries available, period. Like, better than anything Contact has, better than Steve and Slade drums, better than BFD, better than, no offense to Steve, better than, like, just for the sheer depth and, like, availability of the samples and playability even as well. People use them for, electronic drum kits, and it sounds real. Because it, like, ostensibly is. That's why it's kind of like my go-to for doing anything metal or anything like rock related either as well. Because it also like lends for Deathblow when I do that track. That I use Superior Drummer for that as well, but I mostly just use it for cymbals because it lends a certain like legitness to it. To have that style of cymbal in there as opposed to like 909 or 707 cymbals, something like that. It was something that like Southweller Clayton really like impressed upon me, was the importance of cymbals in electronic music that's also supposed to have rockish elements. Is that like it brings home that feeling of it, and it really does. And it really did in this track as well. So that was a big part of this. Anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.